Welcome to Backroom Talk.
Welcome to another episode of Backroom Talk. I am Georgia here with Carl, and we're talking macros today.
It's just like saying, why do supersets, right? It's like, it's a tool to get to an outcome.
Why would you go for a macronutrient plan versus giving someone like a, you're eating 800 calories per day type of program?
And it can be dangerous because people will see results if they adhere to a solid macronutrient plan. But are we setting them up for success for the rest of their lives if they're not getting enough sleep, if they don't understand the benefits of food hygiene?
To listen to more Backroom Talk, be sure to subscribe. Learn to design personalized programs with the OPEX system of coaching by heading to opexfit.com.
Welcome to another episode of Backroom Talk. I am Georgia here with Carl, and we're talking macros today. Carl is waving for the listeners who can't see. It was kind of like a very royal wave, that like open closed palm wave, like the Queen,
like the robotic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just doing this because I have to.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It was an obligatory wave.
Yeah.
No, but we're excited to be here with you for the next hour or so to talk about macros. Kind of a hot topic in the fitness industry, and it's actually something we're doing a workshop on tomorrow. If you're listening to this on the day this episode releases, which is Wednesday, on Thursday, we're hosting a workshop inside of LearnRx for our LearnRx subscribers that is going to be on personalizing macronutrient plans. So that'll be a super fun Zoom call. We'll be all on, cameras on there. We'll set a little bit of context, and then we're going to do some breakout groups and activities to give coaches hands-on practice of actually putting together macronutrient profiles for some very diverse and challenging avatars that they may encounter. So we've got that stuff laid out for you guys. So if you are a LearnRx subscriber, make sure that you are registered for that workshop and able to attend. It's one you're going to want to be in person for, so you can take advantage of that group work. If you're not yet a LearnRx subscriber, then it's not too late to actually get in on that workshop too. All you need to do is go to learnrx.app. We'll drop a link in the description. You can go there, sign up to become a subscriber. And you'll see at the very top of that page, there's going to be a banner with a link for you to go and register to be able to attend the workshop that's coming tomorrow. Maybe you're listening to this and Thursday has already passed.
So we're talking about the 26th of January is Wednesday today.
Yeah.
And the 27th.
27th of Jan.
Because you never know. Somebody might listen to this
way in the future.
A year from now. You never know.
We never
2022.
know.
26th and 27th of
This
January
is true.
2022.
This is true. 27th of Jan is the date of that webinar. So if you are past that date, we will have the recording available, so you can still go ahead and watch it back, but you do have to be a LearnRx subscriber to watch that thing. So learnrx.app, go and subscribe there. We're hosting this one this month. We're going to have another workshop every single month throughout the year on some really interesting topics with some special guest speakers. So as well as all of the awesome like pre-recorded class content in that platform, we also have these live events that are happening throughout the year. So get in there, guys.
Yeah.
All right, Carl. We're going to talk macros though, in preparation for that conversation tomorrow, just to have a little bit more of a casual spin on the topic, and to be able to share some of those thoughts with a wider audience. When was the first time you ever tracked macros? Do you remember?
Gosh, yeah, that's actually a good question. I have to think about that for a second. First time I tracked protein carbs. So the first time that I tracked, the first time I tracked was, I remember I was trying to meet a protein goal that was much too high for my 17-year-old self at 180 pounds or whatever I weighed. I just remember I was trying to hit like 220 or 225 grams of protein. So I tracked protein for quite some time in my teenage years. Actual macro tracking didn't happen for me until I was in college, and our strength conditioning coach brought in his name was Harry Gooman. Harry, hey man, if you're listening to this, appreciate everything that you've done for me. Learned a lot from this guy. But brought this guy in preseason and training camp, and we did a nutrition workshop essentially with the entire organization, and came away with some good gems from that, and started tracking macros specifically off of that to ensure that I wasn't underfeeding myself based on the amount of work we were doing. We were doing like 2-a-days. We were on the field for 5 hours a day. We were in the classroom for another 2 to 3 hours. So yeah, I did it with the intention of not under eating.
Got it.
What about you?
Yeah. I don't remember like exactly what year and exactly what date, but I remember what it was transitioning out of, which was paleo/zone nutrition approaches in like early days CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like played around with other ways to track food quantity in the past. I tracked food, but not really thought about macronutrients per se, more like overall calories. I could definitely done some of that. And then I'd gone like really down the rabbit hole of the paleo diet. Really like down the rabbit hole of the zone diet, because that's what you used to do as a CrossFit coach back in the early days. And was like, why do I feel so crap all the time eating all of this bacon and avocado? And that is when I learned about the power of carbohydrates and how effective they are at fueling high intensity activity, and began taking notice of that and figuring out, how much am I eating when it comes to protein, carbs, and fats throughout the day, working that stuff around training and having fun playing with that, and realizing that like obviously food quality matters, and like I was dialed in with food quality at that point in my life, but also that quantity and quantities of different kinds of macronutrients matter a lot as well.
Yeah. Around that time that I explained, I dabbled a lot in food planning, in terms of just call them like, gosh, I guess you would just call them food plans, right? Where like when you lay out, you're like, when I wake up, I'm having this food, this food, this food. It was all like reverse engineered from macros, of course. But at that time, I don't think I was really thinking about, I need to hit this many carbs, proteins, and fats. It was more like I need to create consistency and see where this thing takes me. So it's weird when, I don't know, I'm just thinking about this right now sitting here, but the intentions of tracking food back then, for me, were a lot different than a lot of the intentions that I hear with people tracking food now, if that makes sense. And it's really easy to say like, there's no real aesthetic goals and blah blah, but everyone thinks about aesthetics, not that everyone has aesthetic goals. So I'd be lying if I were saying like, when I was 20 years old, 19 years old, I wasn't thinking about, man, I'd love to be a little bit more jacked right now as well. The jersey will look a little bit better if I had a little bit more muscle on me. So yeah, it's funny to think back at intentions at a young person and their thoughts around diet and exercise and all of that.
Very much so. Well, let's talk a little bit about intentions of implementing macronutrient programs, because this is something we use in our methodology inside of OPEX CCP. Macros are part of the prescription that someone could use with an individual client when they've reached a certain level and have some prerequisites under their belt prior to going straight to macros. But why use macros? What's the intention there?
Yeah, we've said it a bunch of times before, but it's a tool, right? It's a tool. It's just like saying, why do supersets, right? It's like, it's a tool to get to an outcome. Macros are that. Specific to nutrition and lifestyle, macros are probably one of the most exact sciences, and it's far from an exact science, but it's one of the most exact sciences that we can use with ourselves or with our clients when it comes to getting to an aesthetic goal, or ensuring that a client isn't under eating, and ensuring that a client can build some rhythm and consistency in the amounts of food that they're eating on a daily basis. So macro plans are a tool that we have in our toolbox. That's all they are.
Definitely. Okay. So let's talk about some of the reasons to choose macros over other ways of measuring quantity. So let's start with like macros versus calories. Why would you go for a macronutrient plan versus giving someone like a, slap, you're eating 800 calories per day type of program?
Yeah, man, that's a good one. I've actually never gone down the rabbit hole of tracking calories with the absence of considering protein, carbs, and fat. And I don't know if that's just, I haven't given it a bunch of thought, but I don't know if it's just something intuitive in me where I'm like, why would you just track calories? Protein, carbs, and fat at the end of the day equals calories, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad to track calories versus macros. It just makes a lot more sense to me to track macros, because if you say eat 2,500 calories per day, we would think logically someone's not just going to eat 2,500 calories and just fats, right? And they're like you said, like they're performing, maybe they're going on a couple 10K runs a week, and they're working, and they're doing some resistance training, and they're hiking and all of that. It's like, maybe they need a little bit of carbohydrates, right? Maybe they need some proteins to support the resistance training that they're doing and the goals that they're trying to get from doing that resistance training. So for me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to not consider protein, carbs, and fats when thinking about total calories. So again, I'm not saying people that just say, hey, I need to hit 2,500 calories, I don't care how I get there in terms of how that's distributed with protein, carbs, and fats, but my brain just doesn't work that way. I always just think about macros, and that equals calories.
Yeah. I mean, I know people do just track calories, though. There are definitely people out there who are taking that approach. And where I think that macros are a higher order approach to tracking nutrition than just having a caloric goal is partly in that when you're just setting calories, it's much easier to make like food and exercise transactional. And yeah, like there is definitely a transactional relationship that does happen with energy in, energy out, but it is a little bit more complex than that. But food becomes just that when all you're doing is thinking about calories. When you begin to think about what is inside of those calories, i.e., are they coming from proteins, carbs, and fats, there's more opportunity for education around why we need to fuel our body in a certain way. It's not just about eating enough energy. It's about, okay, we need to eat a variety of proteins to get amino acids so that we can repair muscle tissue. We need to eat carbohydrates because they're going to give us the energy to be able to go on that 10K run. We need to eat good, healthy fat sources because it's going to support hormone production. So I just think there's an opportunity to connect the dot better there between like the nutrition we put in and then what we want to get out of that for the coach and the client to have that conversation versus like, again, just slapping out a caloric intake and not really connecting nutrition with the things that it can provide us, which are good and positive.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. And, if let's look at it from a coach's standpoint. So I'm with you on the opportunity for education and all of that, but I think you're setting someone up for failure if you're saying, like, from a coach's standpoint, hey, I want you to go and consume 2,500 calories, and you don't give them any ideas on how to disperse that, right? Let's say that they're just like, okay, I'm just going to continue to eat the way that I'm eating, and let's say that the food logs that you have has them at like they're just eating like 90% carbohydrates and sugars. And they were eating 2,000 calories per day. So you're trying to up their calories, and you're not giving them any strategies to get to that 2,500. And they're just eating carbohydrates, right? Like they're sticking with 80 to 90% carbohydrates, and they're not getting in any fats. Let's just say that for caloric balance. You're going to have to eat a higher volume of carbohydrates to try to get to that 2,500, because that 1 gram of carb is only worth 4 calories, right? Or 4 units of energy. So there's it goes back to the education piece, but it's like you're almost setting that person up for failure. Because I can't tell you how many times that I've seen macro plans or calorie plans prescribed, and the client on the other side is just like, too much food, I can't get there, right? Or, oh my God, I just blew through that in breakfast, right? So there has to be some strategies behind it, like, hey, maybe you should disperse it this way, right? We can start talking about satiety. We can start talking about if someone's like blowing it up and they're just like, it's too low for me. And it's like, dude, like, I'm giving you 3,000 calories, right? Like you would do okay on 2,500. So I think it offers an additional strategy to get to that caloric goal on top of the education stuff that you mentioned.
Definitely. Well, let's go one more kind of comparison. The like traditional food plan or meal plan where someone gets a printout, this is what you're eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next 4 weeks, compared to a macronutrient plan where it's like, here's your protein, carbs, and fats. You're going to decide how you're going to fill that in. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the differences between the two?
Yeah, gotta individualize it, right? Like there's a percentage of people that would deal really well with a reverse engineered food plan, right? There's some clients that they're just like, hey, I don't want to pull up an app. I don't want to weigh things. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. So you're just like giving them strategies on like, hey, this is about the portion size that we want. And your, chicken and rice and your broccoli or whatever the heck you're giving them for lunch on that day. So I think that bodes well for a percentage of people. Other people are just like, they're just like the puzzle piece person where they're just like, oh, I love the idea of like having these goals and like filling those things in however I see fit. Obviously with some considerations of quality behind that thing. But yeah, I mean, I look at them the same. Like, I don't know if that's the question you were asking, like one versus the other. I look at them as both tools. Yeah, I don't think one's bad or one's good.
I completely agree. I think they're often posed in like polarity. Like you've got macros, which offer flexible dieting or whatever inside of them. And then you've got your rigid meal plan where there's no ability to deviate from that. And that's positioned as a lower order alternative to this like flexible macro plan where you can, not if it fits your macros, because that has some negative connotations around eating Pop-Tarts for every meal, but you have the ability to tailor what you're eating to that macro plan. But I think that there's got to be a combination of the two, like especially for not a novice client, because you're not giving a macro plan to a total, nutrition novice, but for someone that is taking on macros for the first time, there has to be some education around what meals look like. You can't just give someone 3 numbers and expect that they're going to be able to implement that unless they have a really high nutrition IQ.
Yeah.
So there has to be some conversation around here's what breakfast, lunch, and dinner could look like for this first month while you are getting underway with this macro plan. Let's see how that goes, have some freedom and some fun inside of it. But here is something you could use as a starting point, which may look like a more traditional meal plan.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, imagine, like, just think about someone that does have a low nutrition IQ. And you're not, and you're giving them macros, right? It's like, take a step back and think about, is that the right avatar to give macros to if they have a low nutrition IQ? So that might be something that we should consider before giving someone macros. Maybe for that person, they should just get a meal plan. Or maybe for that person, they should just get hey, let's try to eat this for breakfast for the next 4 weeks and then revisit how you're feeling, right? Maybe with that person, you don't jump right to macros because that nutrition IQ is low. Because if we have to give them macros and a meal plan to hit those macros, it's like I can see situations where that's completely valid. But why not just give them one or the other? So now you're giving them 2 things to adhere to. And I understand, like, there could be a scenario where you're just giving them examples, like this is what it could look like. But I would just say as a coach, just give them like a key where it's just like, these proteins have, 10 to 15 grams. Like these servings of these proteins have 10 to 15 grams. These servings of these fats have 5 to 10 grams. These servings of these carbohydrates have 20 or 10 to 15 grams, right? And it's like, here's this key, right? Like use it. It's your little cheat sheet or whatever it is, and move forward.
We should put some of those cheat sheets inside of Coach RX for coaches to use.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Cool.
I just think about my personal experience with tracking macros, and I've seen this play out with clients who've been doing it long term as well, and I've done so on and off for various reasons over the last 10 or so years. And for the first year or so of doing that, it was more rigid and it did follow more of like a meal plan type approach because I wasn't as practiced at it and I needed more, guidelines and didn't have the ability to just like look at a piece of meat and know how many grams of protein were going to be in 4 ounces of it. Whereas today, that's not so much of an issue. So that it has evolved from a more of a kind of meal plan macro based approach to something that is a lot more flexible and interchangeable. And I now have the ability to have variety in there as needed. So I think people evolve in the way that they're able to utilize that tool as well.
It's technology though, right? What's evolved is technology. Thinking about the time that I mentioned when I was 17 and I had to eat 220 grams of protein, I was like writing that shit down, right? I didn't have an app that I could just pop up and like plug, 4 ounces of chicken in. So yeah, I think people do evolve, but technology does as well. So with the person that's like, man, I'm not well versed in it. Like I don't know how to just like, plug in. I can't look at this piece of meat and understand how much protein's in it. It's just like, if you're tracking macros, you're probably using a food scale, right? or else just follow a meal plan. So you're probably using a food scale, and you probably have a smartphone, and you're plugging those numbers in like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal or whatever you use. So for someone that's tracking macros specifically, I think we're outside of giving them ideas of what a meal could look like. They could actually just go through that practice in 30 seconds as they put their meal together. They open up their fridge, they open up their smartphone, and they're like, okay, if I do this amount of chicken, if I do this amount of rice, if I do this amount of, dressing on my salad, it's like, this is what this meal would equal. And they can do that really, really quickly right there in their phone. Whereas before it was like way more of an investment to understand all of that. And if you got it wrong, it's like you've come too far. You can't just go back because you already did all the work, and it's going to take you 30 minutes to prepare to eat every meal and count your macros. Now you could just do it almost not intuitively because you're using a fucking app to understand what you're eating, but you could do it on the fly, more so now than ever.
Just wait until we're able to scan our food, a little picture of our food, and
You could already do that.
Is it like...
It's pretty accurate.
Is it accurate with home cooked food?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. Oh, you're talking about the portion sizes, scan the portion sizes.
Correct.
There was a company that promised this back in 2016, 2017. They had like a purple logo. It was like, I think they were called Smart Plate or something like that. And it was this plate, and it was just absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
Like there was all this marketing behind it, and like all of these scientists that they had on their like advertising, and it was one of those like startups that never came into fruition. They're probably rolling actually. I just don't know if it works as well as they promised it would work.
It probably won't work so well until we've all got chips in our brain, and as we are chewing down and taking in the food that we're eating, it's like just logging in the amount of protein, carbs, and fats that are going down our throat.
No, but you know what offers this opportunity is augmented reality, right? So you throw on like some AR glasses, you look at the food, and you're going to be able to interact with it because you have the glasses on. You're going to be able to choose things. You're going to be able to like, position your head this way, almost like a Face ID scan when you're setting that thing up and you have to like do the circles and all of that. They could definitely do that with, I don't know if they could do that right now, but I would imagine that they will be able to do that if they can't right now with a piece of chicken breast and understand like pretty accurately, what that is, how much it weighs, and the calories, the protein, carbs, and fats inside of that thing.
And we don't have to have chips in our brain. We just have to wear some geeky looking glasses.
Let's not put shit in our bodies. Let's just put things on our bodies that eventually leaks into our bodies. But yeah, if you're listening to this podcast and you want to do a funding round of this technology of augmented reality, maybe we can plug into like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal or something like that. Just shoot me an email. I won't give you my email address. You have to find that, but shoot me an email and we can roll this thing together. I have some really good ideas on that.
Oh, that'd be a fun little side project. So let's talk a little bit about...
It's a big side project.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Next feature update in Coach RX.
We comes with little glasses.
That'd be slick. Let's talk about some of the benefits of macronutrient plans. I think we've hammered out some of them already in this like comparison talk, but what are some of the reasons that you are prescribing macros to people?
Yeah, accuracy, right? You mentioned it, right? It's like, it is this game of caloric balance, right? When anyone has any goal that has anything to do with gaining or losing muscle, fat, anything. So macros is a more accurate, assuming that the user is doing a good job. It's one of the most accurate ways to understand that caloric not balance, but what we're putting inside of our bodies. So it offers, the truth, right? And I know that there's a lot of groups that go back and forth on like, macros are bad, caloric balance is bullshit. It's more on quality. Me specifically, I think I kind of sit like a little bit in the middle there.
Where so it's just boring.
Like, yeah. Well, and the reason why it's like both of those things can be right. I think we live in this world of like, everything has to be yes or no, right or wrong. I think most things actually live somewhere in the middle. There's truth in both sides of those things, right? So it's like, what's the highest order nutrition program? It's probably not even counting your macros, right? it's doing this thing intuitively. But the highest order macro program is probably, respecting the caloric balance equation, understanding that, the way that we burn calories on a day-to-day basis is extremely complex. So we can't really control that, like nailing that down perfectly. But, we do feel like we do have control on the amount of energy that we consume. So with a macro plan and us controlling the consumption of energy and understanding that the burning of energy is very, very complex, and being okay with that and adjusting your consumption based on trending and what's happening based on your goals is probably the best that we can do. So inside of that, because I said the highest order, inside of that, you should also be thinking about the micronutrients that you're putting in your body, and respecting the truths behind those as well, right? I think I hope we're out of the world of like, if it fits your macros, just eat Pop-Tarts, right? Like, I know that was pushed for a little bit, but I think anytime a narrative is pushed, we have to think about why the person is pushing that narrative. I think that's really, really important. A lot of the time, the reason why the person is pushing that narrative has something to do with something that's not that narrative specifically. It's trying to prove a point. It's trying to go against, popular culture. It's something else. And there's some truth in that as well, right? Like if it fits your macros, there's some truth in that. We have to respect caloric balance. But it wasn't like, let's live and die by this thing. And a lot of people that were on that side now admit that. They're just like, yeah, I've shifted my views a little bit on that, right? Like I still believe that energy balance is the truth, but there's a lot that goes into it. And maybe we should start to think about the quality of foods as well. But those same people aren't saying like, caloric balance doesn't matter. It's all about quality, because it's not, right? Based on what someone's goals are. If someone wants to get, leaner, quality food isn't going to make you leaner because the food is high quality. If I had, 5 ounces of organic free range chicken breast versus shitty chicken breast every meal, and my goal was to get leaner, if I'm having the same amount of the same quantity of that really good quality versus bad quality, having the good quality isn't going to make me leaner than having the bad quality stuff, right? There might be some other things that I need to consider on the back end of that. But yeah, calories in and calories out is a real thing. It's just a very complex equation.
Yeah, I'd also say there can be some like secondary benefits or improvements in quality that can happen from paying attention to quantity.
Mm-hmm.
By virtue of like actually taking the time out of your day to look at what you're eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to make sure that you're getting adequate protein, carbs, and fats, you're already likely someone who is going to be making a conscious effort on the quality front as well, unless you're that crazy that's like, I just want to eat Pop-Tarts. Yeah. But again, that's not most people.
I think a lot of people just did that as like a personal experiment.
I think so.
Yeah,
just to, like you said, prove a point.
Mm-hmm.
But you are probably someone who is health conscious and wanting to do the best by their body by making the decision to pay attention to these things. You're going to be aware of how much you're taking in terms of proteins, in terms of fiber. Like when we track macros, we don't just get, carbohydrate count. You can also take a look in that app and see how much fiber you're taking in.
Mm-hmm.
Are you eating a variety of fiberful foods throughout the day? So I guess secondary benefit would just be seeing improvements in quality by virtue of tracking quantity too.
Yeah, I remember when I was like deep into the nutrition coaching realm, it was like that was like the rule of thumb, right? It's like there was always a fiber prescription, and fucking Metamucil didn't count as a part of that, right? So there was no supplemental fiber, and that was challenging for a lot of people to strategize their diet to hit higher fiber. But it was good because you started to see like nutrition logs. You look at nutrition logs without a fiber prescription versus nutrition logs with a fiber prescription, and there's a massive difference in the micronutrient quality of those foods inside of them if supplements are taken out of the equation. So yeah, that's a good point. Like someone that's focused on protein, carbs, fats, and fiber, they're probably also going to be thinking about higher quality food versus the person that's just like eating everything under the sun, right?
Absolutely. It creates some truth and ability to get an objective look of what you're actually doing as well, because it's really easy to have someone ask you on a monthly basis, i.e. your coach, how was your nutrition for the month, and to remember the last meal you ate and color all of the other meals you ate in the context of that meal, right? Like, we remember our most recent memories and we tend to forget the ones that we don't want to. We don't think about the things that we snacked on at 2 p.m. at work, and we don't always think about all those dinners out and stuff like that. But when we are tracking on a consistent basis, you have actual proof of that. You have trends for what caloric intake, what protein, carbs, and fats look like on a monthly basis, not just your most recent memory of this one time you ate a healthy meal. Yeah. So it can create that truth and ability to look back for people too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Any other big benefits of macros?
Yeah, some people just like the game. Right? Some people enjoy it. Some people find that freedom in understanding where they're at. We'll get into it in the negatives of it, but we can't just slap those negatives and say that's the case for everyone across the board. There's some people that enjoy counting macros, and they get plenty of variety in their diets. They're eating really high quality foods. They're not super anal about what they're eating and what they're not eating. They don't get anxious. They're not stressed out about it. It's just a part of what they do. So I would say that's a positive for some people. I think that's a very, very, very small percentage of people, but those people definitely exist.
For sure. I mean, before we go into drawbacks, just thinking about the types of people who get a macronutrient prescription, obviously anyone that needs to control body composition, has a very specific body comp goal, has a weight loss goal, has a weight gain goal, whatever it might be, there's going to be benefits of controlling what they're taking in terms of proteins, carbs, and fats. What about your client who comes to you and they want to be healthy, right? They want to train for health. They are at a healthy normative range in terms of body composition. They don't really want to see any shifts there. They haven't expressed any desire to see any changes. Are there any other reasons other than controlling body composition that you might give that person a macronutrient plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think the difference is you're giving that person a macronutrient plan for a very short period of time to gain an understanding of what food quantity looks like, and give them an idea of the rhythm that they should follow on a daily basis in terms of those food quantities. So with that person, maybe you noticed in that consultation with them that their rhythm around food is just all jacked up, right? And that might be affecting their daily energy levels. For that person, you might give them 7 days of macro counting with very specific goals. And you're like, hey, we're going to do this for 7 days. Our goal is to nail plus or minus X amount of grams of this, that, and the other for 5 of those days. Once we do that, we're going to remove that, and I want you to just kind of follow that flow in daily life. And we're going to revisit this every 3 months, and I want you to count your macros for 7 days every 3 months just to make sure that we're on the same page, because we want to ensure that your energy is great and your rhythm around food is great as well. So the amount of time that you're having that person track macros would change if their goal isn't very specific aesthetic goals. Not to say you have to do that with everyone, but I think most people would benefit from going through a few days of tracking their food very specifically to understand where they're at. And you may not even talk to them about it, but they'll come to their own conclusions of oh my gosh, I didn't know I was only eating 35 grams of protein a day, right? Maybe I should eat a little bit more. Not that I have to weigh everything, but maybe I just need to, really think about every meal having a decent portion size of protein.
Some really important things in what you just said there around using a macro profile for those people. I guess first one, being really clear on what the goal of it is. You're not just giving them a macro profile because you're giving it to them or because they're trying to lose or gain weight. You're being clear that it's for the specific purpose to get insight into what they're doing right now and how that might be impacting energy and rhythm. And then number 2, you're setting very clear times for which they're going to be doing that, so they know what the end is. They know exactly how long they're going to be doing this, and it's not just this thing that's going to drag on forever.
Yeah, and if you set that context when they're at breakfast and they're pouring that oatmeal into their bowl or whatever it is, they're not just like looking at the number on the scale. They're actually observing how much oatmeal is in that bowl, and they're just like downloading that information in their brains, and they're saying like, okay, next week I know that when I have this bowl of oatmeal, I'm going to have about this much, right, per serving. So yeah, the context is super important in a situation like that.
Definitely. All right, let's talk about some of the drawbacks of macronutrient plans. So what are the big ones for you?
Yeah, no particular order. It would be just execution could be off if someone doesn't really know what they're doing. Like the end user or the person that's following the plan specifically, maybe they don't know how to count macros, right? Like maybe they don't know I know it sounds dumb, but maybe they don't know how to use a scale, right? Maybe they don't know like some like easy little tips and tricks of like, putting your plate on, zeroing out, little things like that. And they don't know the difference between weighing something raw versus cooked and the differences in like proteins that could offer. Just like little strategies around that, and the execution. I think a good example is, when someone thinks that they have to weigh, all of their meat raw, and they're just like, oh my God, it's a massive burden. Every time I cook meat, I have to cook it from fresh. I have to weigh it right before I throw it in the oven or on the grill or wherever they're cooking that thing. And I can't keep up with this. It's just too much work because they don't know those little strategies and the differences behind it. So that would be one. Another one would be the data isn't always accurate, right? Like I know I said it offers like truth in data, but God, what is the number? It's like 15 to 20%. Food labels can be off legally. It's a huge difference, right?
Yep.
If someone has great rhythm around the types of food that they're eating and they have no variety in their diet, that might be okay, right? Because they're going to self-regulate. They're going to be on 2,500 calories, quote unquote. They're going to realize they're not getting their goals there. So they're going to add a couple hundred or take a couple hundred away. And then that stuff will just all even out in the end because they're eating the same things. But you get someone that's like, they're just like, I do not like eating the same thing within the same week, right? And they just have like this super variety filled diet. Their numbers might be completely off based on the app they're using to log the food labels, their tactics and execution on weighing and measuring and stuff like that. So although it could be very accurate, it could also be very inaccurate because the data is just it's all over the place in some places.
I just want to like stop on something you said there for a second, because this is a thing I like spend probably too much time thinking about. And it is that person that's like, I can't eat the same thing twice. Because, I mean, we all can. We're all capable of doing it. And when we talk about ease of implementation of nutrition protocols, when someone is willing to have some consistency in breakfast, eat the same lunch for a couple days, eat the same dinner for a couple days, it makes stuff so much easier, especially for that person that's complaining about being time poor and not having, time to prepare food. And sometimes I want to be really empathetic to that and be like, okay, let's figure out how we can make sure you've got a huge amount of variety so you're not getting bored, because you're not going to stick with it if you're bored. And then on the other hand, being like, you're a grown-up, grow up, eat the same thing for dinner 2 nights in a row. It's not going to kill you, and it's going to make your life a hell of a lot easier if you can learn that not every meal has to be like the best, most exciting, most novel meal of your life.
Yeah. I mean, I would ask them, why do you get so much pleasure from eating such a I don't want to use variety because there's some positives there, but
right?
Why do you get so much pleasure from eating different things at every meal? And maybe they're just not, this might be a stretch for some people, but maybe they get all of their happiness from food, right? Like maybe everything else in their life is just shit, and food is the one constant where they're just like, I look forward to eating every single meal because it makes me feel really good, right? Sometimes food makes me feel really good too, so I can be empathetic to that, but maybe something else is missing. Maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had to fill some void somewhere else in life, so you're not counting on every single meal to be that void filler for them.
Yeah, it's that's a deep one to stew on, but it just becomes really hard for people to like actually make nutrition changes when they're not open to some element of consistency there from day to day. And it, like, obviously it can be done. Like you said, variety can be an amazing thing. I think in an ideal situation, we would all cook every one of our meals from scratch using a wide variety of proteins and carb sources and different fat sources. But modern life just dictates that's not always the case. Budgets dictate that that's not always the case. Time means that we can't always do that. So
I just think there's a strategy that we can implement with those people, right? Where it's just like, we want to create some consistency for ease of use, because we want you to hit your goals and we want you to create this rhythm in your nutrition. But what if every Wednesday and Saturday night, that was like an opportunity to have something new, right? It's like maybe that's something that you do on those 2 nights of the week where you are cooking those meals, that one meal on those 2 days from scratch, and you're experimenting with different things. And, maybe those will be even more pleasurable experiences, because the rest of the week you are just like boom, 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 kind of in that rhythm, eating the same types of things day over day. I would actually fall in the camp of like, I can eat the same thing for every meal, forever, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Me too.
So, but I could literally eat, the same thing for breakfast that I eat for lunch, that I eat for dinner for 2 weeks, and be completely fine with it. Just put like a different sauce on it or something like that. So for me, I have to like intentionally create variety, because I'm just like, okay, like let's not have the same protein source for 2 straight weeks for every meal, right? So that's something that I have to work on, is just like creating a little bit more variety. So if I was my own client, I'd probably be having conversations with myself of like, hey, where can we add a little bit of variety? I'm just a creature of habit. I like to do the same things, and sometimes I could be a drawback in that situation. It probably is for me.
Definitely. Yeah. You can go too far one way and the other.
Yeah.
We went down a little rabbit hole there. Thank you for indulging me on that one, but it's just something I think about.
I'm just a very good indulger. So
I appreciate that.
No worries.
So we were talking about drawbacks of counting macros. Yep. So what was next?
I think we kind of already hit this, but technology, right? Like today, I don't remember the last person that I saw counting macros or counting calories that weren't using technology to do it.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. So technological limitations, right? So now we have to start thinking about, not to put all, older individuals into like this bucket of like, you can't use technology, but I think it's fair to say that there's a decent amount of older clients, let's call it like, 60 plus, or like, James is it? No, I'm kidding. that you're like, okay, I want to implement this program with them, and maybe you can't because of those technological limitations, and maybe they're just not willing to like learn that stuff. They're just like, I don't want to waste time learning that shit. So maybe macros just aren't a good idea for those people, because they don't want to use technology. They don't want to use a smartphone in their apps, and they don't want to scan and weigh and blah, 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 blah. So that would be another drawback, is technological limitations.
Yeah, if I told my parents to track macros, they would shut me down real fast.
Yeah. Next one would be, as a coach, it's easy to get lazy.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lazy, and on the back end, just do some calculations, and, send a client a message with like, here are your macros, good luck, right? So just like, implementing a macro program with no context at all. And in your brain, you're like, yep, I checked the box. I did my job as a coach. They asked for nutrition coaching. I'm giving them that. I told them to weigh themselves once a week, send that to me. And if we need to, we'll make some changes. And there's no conversation outside of that. So the person's just left to their own vices. I think that could be a drawback as well.
For sure. Context is key. And then reassessing, and adjusting the plan as needed to make sure that person isn't on, unless they are on the perfect maintenance macro plan and they're exactly where they need to be, making sure that you are implementing changes when energy becomes an issue, when there's compliance issues, when someone is or isn't losing weight or gaining weight at the rate that they want to.
Yeah.
So making sure that there is some way to have open conversation around that, so you actually know what's happening on that side.
Next one, I think I have a couple more. So the next one would be, this is so based in ideology. Let me try to give an example that would make this make a lot of sense for someone that isn't an OPEX person. No not to put all OPEX people in this little bubble like that we all believe the same things, but there's an ideology around lifestyle, and what we coach our coaches. Just imagine if you're a fitness coach out there, or if you just do fitness, imagine trying to do 15 unbroken strict pull-ups before you can do 5. Like, that just doesn't make sense. That's just stupid, right? You're just like, why does my program say 15 unbroken? I can't do 5. Like, you're just like, that's dumb, right? That's how we should look at the lower hanging fruit stuff in lifestyle. Nutrition and macro prescriptions and food plans and all that stuff. It's a part of lifestyle, right? Like, we're trying to build some really good habits with ourselves and with other people. If we're not doing the other things, why go there? Why go there? We're skipping over those other things. And it can be dangerous because people will see results if they adhere to a solid macronutrient plan. But are we setting them up for success for the rest of their lives if they're not getting enough sleep, if they don't understand the benefits of food hygiene, if they don't understand the benefits of just moving their bodies on a daily, like little things like that? I know that's not directly connected to macros, but that's why we have to look at those things, right? Because those are lifestyle habits, right? If you're trying to create really good, sustainable habits in nutrition, we should also think about all the other habits that we should create in lifestyle as well. So when we go straight for the macro plan and someone has successes with those, it's just ingraining in their brains that those other things aren't important. And I just said they had success, but that short-term success, we're talking about like long-term habit building success that they can just carry through this thing until they're 85, right? So the lower hanging fruit and basic lifestyle guidelines, you got to take care of those things first. You have to, or you're going to create some really bad behaviors.
Absolutely. I mean, we implement a nutrition prescription, a macro plan, because we want someone to be appropriately satiated and eating the right amount of food at the right times throughout the day. We want them to have good energy throughout the day and good blood sugar management. We want to make sure they're making good, informed decisions about the food that we're putting in. Let's say we take sleep out of the equation and someone is sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night and following that macro plan. Well, that sleep deficit that they're in and have been in for years is going to, like, maybe not 1-for-1, outweigh all of the benefits that are coming from that macronutrient plan, but it's certainly going to make it an upstream battle to be able to have good blood sugar, to have good satiation, to make sure that that person has good cognitive decision-making abilities, because a lack of sleep is going to wipe all of that stuff out. So I just think we have to think about, okay, here's the outcome we're looking from this nutrition plan. What are the other things other than macronutrients that are going to affect that? And hydration status does, food hygiene does, sleep does, sunshine does. All of these other things are going to influence the success or failure of that plan too.
Yeah, for sure. And if we strip that thing away, we don't want it to be detrimental to the entire plan, right? Or the entire success of that person moving forward, whatever the heck success means to that person. So, if we tear macros away, or they wake up one day and they're like, fuck, I'm so tired of counting macros, I'm just going to stop. Will they still see long-term sustainable results? And do they have healthy behaviors built in? If they're not getting enough sleep and moving their bodies and have really good food hygiene and all that, if you tear macros away, they're just going to go down the chute, right? If they do have all those things, right? They move their bodies, good sleep, hygiene, all that stuff. You tear macros away, they're going to be fine because they have really good behaviors built in. Let's compare it to exercise again. Let's say that you have a client that trains 3 times a week, right? They do resistance training twice, and they do aerobic training once, okay? And they just do that sustainably because they can keep up with it. They're just like, you ask them, you're like, how hard is your program? They're like, not hard at all. I go in for 60 minutes, I get it in, I'm out, I feel great, I'm recovering, awesome, cool, high five. And then you have someone that trains 3 times a week, and all they do is HIIT training, like high intensity training, 3 times a week, okay? What if you took HIIT training away from that person that all they do is HIIT training? What are they going to do for physical activity?
HIIT training?
No. If you take it away, what are they going to do?
If you take away the HIIT training.
Yep. You have someone that trains 3 times a week. All they do is HIIT training, and then they get tired of it and they stop doing HIIT training. how many training sessions are they going to
zero.
do?
They've got nothing.
Yeah, they're not going to do anything anymore, right? So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about building balance with people. It's not going all in on one idea or one thing, because you might get injured, you might get tired of it, you might get burnt out, and then you're going to stop doing that thing. And then once you stop doing that thing, you're not going to be doing anything. You take the person that does resistance training 3 times a week or twice a week, and they're doing aerobics once a week. What if they get tired of doing aerobics? They're still doing resistance training twice a week, and they might even add a third day, right? So balance is really, really important. And we've seen this play out. I've seen it play out in my facilities before, where people got burnt out of doing what they were doing, and then they went to doing nothing because they didn't have balance. They were just like all in on this one thing. And once they got tired of that one thing, they just stopped doing physical activity, right? Like, we should look at lifestyle and nutrition plans the exact same way. We should create balance. We should create a really good base. A base is lifestyle before we slap on macronutrients.
For sure. That's a really, really good way to illustrate that. I like that example.
Awesome.
A lot. Can we talk a little bit about the emotional considerations for macronutrient profiles? Because I think it's an important place to go. I think this is one of the reasons that people are so pro or anti macros as well, because it is a topic that can be fueled by emotion for a lot of people. So what are some of the, emotions that a coach should be considerate of that may arise when they are prescribing a macro plan?
Yeah. So this is something that I've changed my mind on over the past few years, where macro plans were going to completely ruin society and their relationship with food. I actually don't think that's the case. I think we have to look at, and this is really big picture, but and I'm attaching this to people with eating disorders or that develop eating disorders. I don't think macro plans are doing that to people. I think that those people may have had that inside of them, and no matter what they did, they were going to end up there anyway. There's actually a great, I'll send it over to you so we can link this in the description, but there was actually an interesting study that Greg Nuckols and Stronger by Science
I read that.
Did you see that?
I did.
Yeah, I ran across that, and I read that a few days ago, and I was like, huh, okay. And essentially what they laid out was just they took a group of people and they gave them a macro plan, or I don't know if it was it macro or calories.
I don't remember what the
anyway,
details
they were just track your food.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was does food tracking lead to disordered eating? And the result was no, it actually went the other way. The people that didn't track ended up more on the spectrum of disordered eating than the people that did go in and track their food. No one study can be the answer. So I'm not going to say this is what we should all believe because this one study picked this up, because there was a bunch of flaws in that study. But I thought it was interesting, right? Because it was just something that I was actually thinking about, because we're having this conversation and doing that webinar, and that popped up, and I was like, oh, this is good timing. So I don't think macros are as dangerous as me personally used to think, where it's you give the wrong person macros and their fucking life is going to be ruined. I don't think that's the case. I still think, based on what we just went through, I do think there's other things that need to be baseline, like lifestyle. But I think that's the first thing I would think about in terms of emotional considerations, is just disordered eating. You have to be careful if someone has experiences with disordered eating. We don't want to slap a macronutrient profile on that person, because they're more at risk to fall back into that trap, right? I've had clients that have had eating disorders in the past, and luckily I've never made the mistake of trying to give them this stringent nutrition plan, because intuitively I just thought that's probably not a good idea. But I'm sure there are coaches that do without, and they may just not think about it, but we should think about those things, people's experiences, not with macro tracking specifically, but just with eating and what their current relationship with food is. You get someone that has a terrible relationship with food, it's probably going to dig them a deeper hole if you tell them, okay, you have a bad relationship with this thing. Let's create a better relationship by weighing and measuring everything and looking at everything that you're eating through a very, very, very fine microscope. Probably not a great idea. So I think we just have to look at people's histories and all of their experiences and what their relationship really is with food.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I think the reason that macro plans or tracking and logging get such a rap for causing eating disorders is because the people who are predisposed to disordered eating are the ones that are doing it, right? Like they're the ones that might have already made the decision themselves without even hiring a coach to go ahead and track that stuff and to really dial in and try and control it.
Or they have extreme goals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like someone that wants to be in a 1,200 calorie deficit, they're probably going to track their food to ensure that they're in that 1,200 calorie deficit. And those fucking people already had an eating disorder, or they were going to develop that eating disorder anyway. And maybe it wasn't just because, I wanted to be skinny. Maybe it's because I needed to be on stage and I need to be as lean as possible. But yeah, I agree with you, right? It's like, tracking the food could have just been a result of that eating disorder. It's not that tracking the food caused the eating disorder.
I think it's another reason why conversation and context are so important, because the clients that are predisposed to that may be the ones that actually are the most compliant and show the most success, at least initially on paper, with that macro plan. They're the ones who are actually able to execute on it. They're the ones that are seeing the fluctuations that they want to see. And you as a coach, it might be really easy to be like, high five, look at this before and after picture. This person did amazing. They lost 20 pounds on my macro plan. We've all seen that. But how many of those people had that success because of a disordered relationship with food that let them be 100% committed and let their entire life be sucked up by this one prescription?
Yeah, I think we need to look at the stories of people that implemented macro plans, saw great results. They took away that macro plan and they continued to go on that path, see great results, or keep up with the results that they had. Those would be the interesting case studies to me, not the people that are on the before and afters, and then you see them, a year, 2 years later, and they're just back to where they started or even worse.
Absolutely. I mean, what are some of the things, other than a client like upfront telling you, I have an eating disorder or this is going to be problematic for me, what are some of the red flags you'd look for in consultation to decide whether or not you wanted to give someone a macro plan?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I don't think there's any like frameworks that we can offer that would say, you're going to catch this 100% of the time. But I think a lot of the time we can catch them and just the way that people respond to the conversation, right? Like we have to be able to feel the room, feel the energy in the room when we're having the conversation on the nutrition plan and how we're going to implement this thing. And a lot of clients are just like they're coach pleasers, right? They just want to please their coach. They want to make everything as easy as possible for their coach. They feel bad when their coach has to do more quote unquote work. They feel their coach knows best and they're just going to go with the flow with anything that their coach says because they trust them. But when we have conversations with people, we have to, feel out the room, right? Like when we ask someone a question and we see like, a little bit of pause or we see some hesitation there and the answer ends up being yes, it's like we have to take a step back and, hey, are you sure? I noticed that, when I asked you that, your shoulders dropped, you paused, you looked up and to the right a little bit, right? Like we have to be able to feel the room out a little bit. So I think a lot of it just could be caught in conversation, and not conversation through like, Messenger on CoachRx, right? It's like actual conversation with someone and being able to feel their energy when you're bouncing back and forth ideas of what we can implement. Because remember what we said, right? Macros are a tool. If that tool isn't the right tool for that person, there's other tools that we can use. Don't try to like talk that client into doing this because that's your favorite tool. So I think we have to be able to feel it out.
Absolutely. I agree. The like body language piece is huge. How they respond to questions is huge. Two things that I look for in like intake and then in initial consultation when deciding what may or may not be appropriate is past history with nutrition programs. Like, have they tried everything and like done that yo-yo dieting thing in the past? Because that's a sign that someone may have an unhealthy relationship with food that we're going to need to be watchful of? And then is someone unclear on why they may have a weight loss or weight gain goal? Do they want to get jacked, or do they want to lose 20 pounds, but they can't really yet enunciate the reason behind it and why that's important to them?
Yeah.
I think that's another sign that there may be some preoccupation or body dysmorphia that could be going on. Maybe not, but just a good thing to look for and to try and dig a little bit deeper on when the client is ready to talk about it.
Yeah. And then just ask those not deeper, it's not a deep question, but just dig a little bit deeper. When someone says that they have a specific goal, just ask the question, how do we know when we reach that goal?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And most people are just like, fuck, good question. I don't know. I don't know what it means to be leaner. But I have no idea. It's like, is that like a number on the scale? Is that your body fat percentage and the in-body? Is that just looking in the mirror and it's like a certain look that you're looking for? Like, what does that actually mean? Sorry, I did this thing with like my...
guys should have seen it.
Yeah, that was pretty good. I was feeling myself. No, but yeah, you just dig a little bit deeper and you just ask like, well, okay, what does that mean? Because you have to have something objective. You have to have something objective, or else you're just going to keep going down this path and it's never going to be good enough. That's why we have assessments, right? That's why we have those like objective measures that we can look back against and say like, okay, we're moving toward this thing or we're not moving toward this thing. We need to make some adjustments.
That's it.
Yeah.
Any other emotional considerations?
No, I mean, yeah, there's a bunch more.
I know.
For time's sake, I think we hit like the biggest ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, for the 15th time, I think we just have to say it's macros are a tool. I sit somewhere in the middle with, macros versus the other thing versus the other thing. I just think it's honestly it's an individualized thing, but we have to have standards as coaches as well, right? So if you feel one way or the other very strongly and you have a really good reason and that's just like in your blood and in your ideology, just fucking stick to it, right? If it's not and you're willing to like, open your mind a little bit and have a different take on things, that's fine as well. But what we can't get into is, having a conversation with a client and that client determining what the prescription is going to be all in. The client plays a role in that. But if, we just walk through a lot of different scenarios and some ideas around like building the base with lifestyle and, that having to be in place before you go to macros. If you really believe that as a coach and you're on a consultation with a client, the client's like, I just want you to give me macros and I know I'll be successful. And you're just like, fuck, but you sleep 3 hours a night. You're really stressed out. Your exercise compliance is like 46%. Is this actually going to be the right thing, right? Like, don't give in to that. Like, have the conversation with them and say, hey, I don't think it's a great idea because of X, Y, Z, right? And like, these are my beliefs and these are my standards as a coach. So I'm not gonna flex on those, right? Like, if you want to do those things, you're gonna have to go somewhere else, right? Like, we have to be able to put our foot down as a coach. And I know sometimes that could be hard because clients equal money for a lot of coaches, and they depend on that. But if you don't have standards, your job is just going to be a lot harder and you're just going to be floating around.
Definitely. I mean, no tool is inherently good or bad. The application of it is going to determine whether or not it's the right approach or the wrong approach for someone. And things to consider when we prescribe exercise. Is the person capable of it? Is it connected to the goal that they're trying to achieve? Do they have the resources, i.e. the time, the money, so on and so forth, to be able to do this thing? We ask those questions around exercise. Why would we not also ask them around nutrition before we write that macro plan for that client? So, just use the OPEX method, guys. It's not that complex.
Just really quick, because you said no tool is good or bad. I'll disagree. I would say like a corset is bad. If you're trying to like constrict your organs down to be a little bit leaner, would you agree that might be bad?
I would agree that might be bad.
Or is that just a tool? It might be good for some people. Maybe they have overly large organs and then you
just want to squish that stuff down. Yeah.
That's next episode. We'll talk about the goods and the bads of
waist trainers.
Waist trainers.
Please don't do that, guys. Coaches, it's not part of the prescription. Well, we would love to see you, if you are listening to this on Wednesday, we'd love to see you on the workshop that we'll be hosting inside of LearnRx for LearnRx subscribers. Like I said, we're going to be going through some really fun nutrition avatars, helping you guys figure out the best way to prescribe macronutrient profiles for them, and having group discussion on the answers that that you come up with. So some really good feedback and interaction that's going to happen on that call. Make sure you head to learnrx.app and subscribe to be a part of that, and hope to see you there.
See you guys there.
Bye.
Bye.